Hey there, beautiful people. This is Gina Robinson, and you are listening to the Renew Podcast. You are in the right place and always welcome here. All right, ladies, welcome back to the Renew Podcast. Today, this is always an exciting time for Pastor Lauren and I. We are back as a team. Sorry, guys, we've gone nowhere. But this is our favorite time as we really get to talk to people in our community about their stories, their testimonies. We have a special guest with us today who actually, she and her family come to Open Door, and that is Lawson Dixon. You haven't been married that long, Lawson, so newly married, I would say, new baby, only 4 months old.
Little Charlie, I love that.
No, guys. Anyway, her name is Charleston. What's her middle name?
Gray.
Charleston Gray Dixon. Oh, is that after your husband, Gray?
Yes, ma'am.
That's sweet. So they call her nickname is Charlie
Gray.
Charlie Gray.
So cute.
But I had a conversation with Lawson recently, and one thing that we value at Open Door is, it's okay to not be okay.
Just don't want to stay that way.
But we ain't staying there, people. We ain't staying there. And so one of the things that we like to do is talk about people that are professionally trained in counseling and therapy, emotional health. We've had people on with fitness and healthy eating. We've got guests coming on. We're going to be talking about menopause in the future, I think. But there's different stages of life that women go through. And one of the, I would say, privileges of your job is you get to minister to people during therapy, being a therapist yourself, but also young adults. And so first of all, I just want you to tell everybody, how did you get on this track? A little bit of your story of faith. She grew up in this huge town called Hobgood.
I may have Googled it.
I'll let her take it from here.
Yeah, as Gina said, I'm Lawson. I just remember growing up being super intrigued by people and the way that people felt. So I always felt like I was called to be a nurse because that was one of the first things that I saw. And I was like, oh, I just want to help people, nurse. So then as I got older and went on a field trip, we were dissecting fish.
Ew.
So I figured out very quickly that I was not called to be a nurse, and I was going through different opportunities with college and felt called to psychology. So I went to Liberty University and just kind of felt like psychology was interesting, but it wasn't where I wanted to stay. So I kind of started exploring different opportunities. And I remember at one of our convocations, we had a recovering addict speak. And I just remember him talking so much about the need for counseling. So I was like, that's interesting. Like, I've always thought that, being a counselor would be interesting, but not ever something that I was intrigued by.
Yeah.
So then I transferred to ECU to move back closer to home because I missed my family. And I just found that I was just really hit when I transitioned from always being in private school and Christian school and transitioning to a secular college. Like, I just felt this warfare come over me.
Yeah.
And I just was like, God, like, what's happening? And then in that process, I found myself really, really, really pondering, what is my purpose? What's my purpose on earth? What's my purpose within my job? Because obviously we're at college for a reason.
Yeah.
So then I started to really, really, really get deep into this valley. And I'll never forget being at Open Door one Sunday, and I believe it was Pastor Chandler speaking, and he was speaking just about really being well with our soul, like the Lord makes us well with our soul. And that's the reason why I got this tattoo, because it is well with our soul. And then in that moment, I really started to find peace. And then through that, I found, that the Lord was really gearing me towards counseling. So I started seeking out some counseling opportunities and what my degree would look like, switched over to social work. Still wasn't overly sold on the idea of social work going to be a counselor. So I started exploring some opportunities and just found that counseling was just something that really intrigued me. So through that, I was like, well, I got to get my master's. So I started applying to master's programs, but within that, I only applied to one. I was told, applying to this one master's program, you're going to get in. Nobody gets denied. right? So here we are, and I'm the first person that's ever gotten denied from this program. So of course
Wow.
I experienced this immediate rejection. Like, God, is this really what you want me to do? Or do you want me to just stick with where I'm at now and just find a job? So I started seeking out jobs and that kind of thing, and the Lord kept taking me back to counseling. And I remember just surfing Facebook one day, and Liberty University's licensed clinical mental health counseling program came up, and I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. So I was like, well, I'll just apply and I'll keep looking for jobs because it still wasn't sold.
Yeah.
And I got accepted the next week. So I found through that season that the Lord really used that rejection piece to direct me to where he wanted me to go. He didn't want me to, really find a job or, look into something within the profession that I was getting my bachelor's in. He wanted me to
Yeah.
continue to pursue counseling. So that's what led me to getting my master's. Got my master's through Liberty Online.
That's
So that was interesting, but I loved it.
Yeah. Was that during COVID?
Oh, yes. During COVID.
I know. Isn't that we always go back to the time frame? Was that COVID?
Yes.
Sorry,
Pre-COVID,
but I'm just like
post-COVID.
going, I think that was. So you were actually getting your master's during that. So you were online anyway. And I know Liberty is, you have to do online unless you're going to live in Virginia, I guess.
Sure, yeah. And I was pretty adamant about staying here and didn't really want to transition back to Lynchburg. So
Yeah.
doing your master's online within itself is hard, but especially during COVID when everything was shut down, there was just this isolation piece that I experienced too through that. And God, again, just pulled me out of that valley and said, this is what I'm calling you to do. We're going to stay on track with this.
Yeah, that's so cool. I know. I've got a million questions running through my head. I'm like, okay, where do I want to start? So now you're with Anchored Counseling
Yes.
in town, which is amazing. You see all ages of patients, right?
Yes,
Tell us a
ma'am.
little bit about what you do on a daily basis, and I want to talk about young adults and kind of some of the things that you've seen reoccurring, some of maybe the questions, struggles they have, and maybe some encouragement that you can give.
Sure.
We probably have moms listening that have young adults, or their children will be young adults. And we probably have some young professionals, young adults that are listening that are like, oh, I can relate to that because that's how, I've been feeling or whatever. So,
Sure. So one of what I do on a daily basis is counseling, sitting with people. What I've found is how important it is to just sit and be heard for people when they come to counseling. They don't always want an immediate, here's the problem, here's the solution. Sometimes people struggle with just being heard and being felt. So that's something that I do a lot of. But one of the biggest things that I've seen, because the population that I'm working with right now is young adults to anywhere from kids to young adults. And one of the biggest things that I've seen has been just this identity crisis almost. Seeing kids and young adults just really struggle with, where do I go next? What's the next step? Rather than just sitting and being where God has us right now. And that's one of the biggest things that I try to help my clients realize is so important to not miss this season, because in this season, God is preparing us for what's to come. So we need to, remember all the things that God says we are right now.
yeah, we talked about that recently, seasons
Yeah,
and
I was
stuff.
also, that reminded me of something that Miss Anita talked about just being present.
Yeah.
Not looking backwards, not, trying to figure out what's happening even tomorrow, but just like being present.
Well, I've referred a lot lately to a book, Now and Not Yet, and that's kind of the same concept of just like we really are wired as people as like, we're always wanting what's next or taking the next step, and taking the next step's not bad. But if we miss what God's doing in the now, then we miss not just a glimpse of but really just taking that thing in it to the next season as a gift of like, I learned this in this season to take me to the next. You talked about like the identity crisis and things that you're seeing. We talked about on the phone a little bit about really just young adults not realizing it because it's all they know, but being emotionally immature because they didn't have to really step outside their homes and things, because the young adults that you're counseling didn't have to do some of the things that we may have had to do to be with people, because it was easier to stay inside.
Sure.
And we were asked to stay inside during some of those. So anyway, it's, it can be a false sense of community, because it's a blessing in some ways, because you can reach so many people that way. Sure. Even with counseling, being able to do counseling online has ministered to so many people. But at the same time, there is something that doesn't replace face-to-face.
Sure.
So can you talk about some of the things with the identity crisis that you've seen, and some things that just remind you of some of your sessions you've had that you can encourage others out there?
Sure. So one of the biggest things that I've seen with the identity crisis is just this lack of confidence, this overall arching doubt of self. And something that I like to do in sessions is just really encourage clients to identify with what their strengths are, identify with who the Lord says that they are, and let's grow in those. Let's really celebrate in those moments and say, this is who God has called me to be right now, and these are my strengths, and this is who I'm confident that I am.
Do you think a lot of the things, I know you could probably, I'm thinking about growing up, I can think of times I was insecure or struggled, because I think a lot of times just assume, oh, she must have had a great childhood, and she never had any insecurities.
Oh, she's got it all figured out.
And we know that that's false, because the enemy wants us to believe that about everybody but ourselves, but were there some things growing up foundationally that your parents spoke into you, or that you remember, that have helped you in different seasons, even now, that you're like, oh, that's where that came from? Because it's those foundational truths that you may have been raised in that have helped you along the way.
Sure. I'll never forget something that my mom still says to us to this day is, always remember who you are and whose you are. And that's something that's always stuck with me, because if I can remember who the Lord says that I am, I'm reminded of who I am.
Yeah.
And I've had to remind myself of that so often being a new mom, because I have experienced some of that identity crisis to some degree myself, because stepping into being a parent, don't know how to do some of the stuff, don't know what's required of a baby, and then just stepping into the role of mom and wife, that was hard.
Yeah, because all that was pretty close together for you.
Sure.
And then, so how long have you and Gray been married? I forget.
About 2 years.
2 years, and then your baby's 4 months old.
Yeah.
So it's all, lots of transition.
Absolutely.
Which is kind of cool, because you can relate to the young adults that you're talking to that are going through those transitions, and can relate. Like, I know what transition feels like, because we all go through those things in life. Is there anything now that, like, I think some practical things are always helpful for people when they're going, I know for me, I'm like, okay, what's the next step, right? We talked about taking steps, but when you're just kind of talking with young adults and you're like, okay, let's remember and focus on your strengths. Are there some things that you're like, okay, incorporate this daily, that maybe that'll help you without, because I really feel like that it's easy for people to get overwhelmed by what they maybe need to do. And I know that we can overwhelm people ourselves going, okay, well, you should do this and you should. And I love the fact that you said many times people, they don't need you to fix it or come with a resolution or you need to do this. They need to be heard.
Sure.
I'm shocked many times that most people just want to be heard. In a place where someone can just hear without, that's not a family member or anybody else, that you can just listen and be able to be a voice of truth, but also encouragement without trying to correct and those type of things.
Sure.
Is there anything that you would say that you've seen that's been helpful in your counseling sessions that way to like help others?
Yeah. One of the biggest things that I challenge my clients to, because like you said, oftentimes when we say we're going to do this, this, and this within a week span, how often do we forget those things, right? So one of the things I just remind clients is self-affirmation. Affirm yourself of who God says you are. Staying in the Word, being with your community, being present in your day-to-day life is the things that I've found have been the most beneficial for clients struggling with identity and confidence issues.
Gosh,
I got a question.
I do it. Do
I'm never
it.
dying to ask. So we have a high schooler, and
Everybody pray. No,
No, seriously. He gets his license in September. Pray for me.
watch the roads.
Anyhow, so I am discovering, I'll be 43, and went to school here, grew up here, and go Vikings, class of 2000. But my high school experience versus what I'm seeing him navigate now is very different on so many levels. But the one I wanted to talk through and get your opinion on specifically is now everything is so much about like tracks. Like, do you want to go to the 4-year college track? Do you want to dual enroll? Do you want to do all these things? And what I'm finding is now kids can graduate and they've already got their associates.
Sure.
So they're graduating earlier. They're going into universities earlier. And it's like from such an early age. And the counselor that we talked to about it was so helpful and so honest and just said, look, you don't have to have it all figured out. But how many times do kids, high schoolers, feel like I have to know what I'm doing now at 14, 15 years old? Because everything I'm deciding now will ultimately impact,
Sure.
the future. So even thinking about colleges, it was interesting to hear her talk through about how, well, certain colleges only want you to take AP classes and not dual enroll, or some colleges is vice versa. And I'm like, he doesn't even know what he wants to eat. How is he? It's all the things. And so in my mind as a mom, I'm sitting there and I'm like, wow, this seems like so much pressure that I did not have to process being 15, 16 years old. So I didn't know, do you think that is part of perhaps some of the anxiety that young adults are feeling because they have been programmed to have all the answers, have it figured out? What have you seen that, experienced that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Even at a younger age than high school, even starting in like middle school, starting to see that the pressure is on for, taking EOGs and getting to the next grade or doing different milestones in school to get to the next thing. There's just so much pressure involved with that. And one of the things that I challenge those clients to is to just, like you said, you don't have to have it all figured out today. And it's okay if we don't do as well as we think, or it's okay if we don't have the plan figured out today, because God knows what tomorrow holds.
I know.
And today we're just going to sit with where we're at. We're going to be okay with that.
I know. It's so hard though, because I think instructors and people in the professions, they're trained. They may not have been trained that way, but they are challenged to think that way too, because there's so many different in the school systems. But you're right, Lauren. We didn't have to think about what our track was. I mean, like, it was more of like, what are your interests? But it didn't really go past that.
Sure.
I don't remember anything, but I do remember that season starting with my oldest and then my youngest son, and they did do dual enrollment. But one of the things that I can actually say that was a benefit for my youngest was he always knew that he wanted to graduate in 4 years. He didn't, it wasn't important that he had like his associates or anything, but some of his friends did. But he was like, I'm so glad that I took enough dual enrollment classes that when I got to college, I never had to take over 14 hours a semester to graduate.
Sure.
But the thing is they're not, he wasn't coached on that, like, or to say, these are some options.
Sure.
And I think most of the time where your son is, Lauren, I just think that a lot of times it looks like this is the way to go to be successful.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, there's
Not
so much pressure, like you were
Sure.
saying. I mean, it's so much pressure. And just thinking about with EOGs, last year was our youngest first time taking EOGs, and I never had experienced any testing anxiety with him before. But he is wired to, I want to make an A and I want to do my best. And I'm like, wow, good for you, buddy. But that's not anything that we've ever, put on you. But I remember his first experience last year with EOGs, and his teacher, who I love, she messaged me. She was like, because they take it over the course of like a couple of days. And she said, hey, she was like, David finished his test in like 30 minutes. I was like, oh no.
Bad sign.
But what came out was that he had decided in his mind that if I don't feel like I'm going to do well, I'm not going to try, because then I won't have failed.
Yeah.
And I just thought, my gosh, he's 9. And how that is just magnified, and it just kind of snowballs over time. And I don't know, it's just been something I've obviously in that season of life where I'm just trying to remind my kids, like, hey, I did go the 4-year route. I went to East Carolina, graduated with a degree. My life changed a lot over the last 20 years.
Sure.
And some of it, I was grateful for the college experience. Learned a lot, and here I am as a senior pastor. Sometimes it doesn't make sense.
And
I think
wasn't the dream in the beginning.
Oh my gosh, not at all. Not at all. And so I just think, talking to, my 15-year-old, I'm like, you know what? I do believe in preparation, and I do want us to do our best, but submitting everything to the Lord and saying, like, I just want to do the next step, and if I missed up, I'm going to trust God to get me back where I'm supposed to be.
So. I'm definitely an advocate for what's going to bring you less stress in this season of life with kids, because there's so much pressure. So, like, if it's going to be something that's going to alleviate, to help some things, not make life easy for you, but if this is really going to help you, then that's one thing. But if it's just to like put something on a report card or a transcript,
Oh my gosh,
to say you did it, then that might not have a whole lot of benefit, So I definitely, and all our children, and you, as a young mom, you're going to be learning this, and you have a pretty big family though, aren't y'all?
I do. I have 3 sisters.
Yeah.
Ooh, all girls?
Well, there's 3 of us, 2 sisters, and all girls.
Oh man.
Isn't that something? Your poor daddy. I should say your blessed daddy, because he's got all the girls loving on him. But I just think, going through that with your children, and every child is different.
Absolutely.
And the unfortunate thing is there's a program that you got to follow through school. But you do, thank goodness there are choices that you can make that will make your path. But it is, I remember that was a very stressful season of not trying to do, okay, we have to do this, this, and this. And look at you were applying to a college that you thought you wanted to go to for master's, and the Lord was like, nope, I'm redirecting you.
That's exactly right.
Didn't you love hearing that? No.
Loved it.
It was just fun being in that valley. Yeah. Love that. But it's so good that that's an experience that you can share, even in your counseling now.
Absolutely.
And just working through those type of things. So you see children, and so what's your youngest that y'all do?
We all kind of create our own niche, so we kind of figure out what works best for us. I would say mine right now is around 10, 11.
Yeah. That pre-adolescent.
That's right.
That's
that's a tough age too.
It is so funny. It's so funny because I love that age. I love it.
Well, that's so good that you know
Called
that.
to it.
Though.
I love that.
Yeah, that's really, really good. Well, it's good to know too, because many times I remember, like, people will ask, who sees children? And there's a lot of counselors that see adults, but you don't find many that feel like that's their niche that they can like really like focus on. You have any more questions? No. That was a really good question though, because I bet all the mamas are like, let me get out my pad. I know, because everybody who has a teenager that's thinking, they think about college earlier too. Which,
oh my gosh, they do. Which
vocations and apprenticeships and all these things that they're talking about now, I can respect so much too. When people really like know, if they know I want to I want to be a welder, and like I love doing
Yeah.
this, but
And it is, I think there's a benefit to it because there are so many options where you can try things.
Sure.
And discover, thought I wanted to do this. So you are in some ways able to have the opportunity to explore more things and kind
Sure.
of figure out in real time whether or not like there's a welding opportunity at Conley. Well, if Wesley thought, hey, I might want to be that, he can actually try it
Yep.
out for free and not waste, money
Sure.
in college trying to figure it out. So I think sometimes depending on the person's personality, I can get overwhelmed by options. And so just like, give me 3 and I will make a great decision.
Don't
but
give me a ton.
Give me 100 and I'm like, I don't know. And I feel
you know what?
really
This is
overwhelmed.
making sense now because
How dysfunctional I am, Gina?
No, it's just I just had like a light bulb go off in my own brain about myself when you said options, because when I'm in a restaurant on a menu, my boys will go, Mom, just make a decision.
See, I'm a control freak and I like to look at menus before I go.
Oh, okay. Yes, Lauren is a step above me, guys. She has checked out the menu before she gets to the restaurant.
Well, because I know myself well enough to know I will get overwhelmed.
Yes.
And when I'm at a restaurant, 9 times out of 10, I'm with somebody that I want to be engaged with and I want to be present and I want to have that conversation.
Sure.
I don't want to be distracted by what am I going to order.
What's the appetizer I'm going to
you know
have?
what I mean?
You know?
I can be an overthinker that way.
It is true, but this is making sense about myself because I'm like, why does it take me so long to figure out what I'm going to eat? My next question will go, what are you getting?
You do that. You do that.
Okay, what are you getting? Because maybe I want that too. Oh gosh, we did a little rabbit trail there, guys.
Sorry.
But anyway, there's anything else that you would like to tell people that are listening? Because as a therapist, this is your opportunity. Because many times people don't get an opportunity to say, "I wish really people knew this about this season of life or what's going on." And 2, I think another thing I was thinking about, many people, I'll get this question. They're like, okay, I've just started seeing someone to go through some counseling about this situation or maybe something in my childhood. I mean, how often should I go? Or when should I go? Or because it's really the concept or even the idea of getting healing, emotional healing, and maybe it doesn't even have to be healing from your past. Maybe something you're going through right now is foreign to a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
So is there anything that you like to tell people when they come? Because I'm sure you see a client, and if it's not a kid and it's a young adult, and they're like, okay, do you make that decision or do you say, hey, this is what I suggest when you're seeing people?
I have a suggestion, but then of course I leave it to them because we want them
Yes.
to be autonomous. Like we want
Yeah.
them to have everything in their control. And as you said, your emotional healing journey is yours. We're just here to help and guide. So I kind of remind clients of that and say, as slow or as fast as this is going to take is up to you. So if you feel the need to come every week, that's fine. Or we can go to once a month. Depends on, what they're going through and how severe they feel like it is and how fast they want to overcome and step into a new season or situation.
All right. And then the other thing, I got one thing. When Lauren was talking about teenagers, talking about, we've got seniors, whether it's high school or college, that have just graduated, and high school seniors that are going to be graduating. You did in your internship this class that was a transition type thing. And I don't know, it was from seniors going into their freshman year. There may not be anything else out there like that, but I know when my son was going to ECU, there was actually a freshman class, and it was a semester that they took, and it was just for freshmen. And I remember my oldest was like, nah, I got this. I don't want to do that. The firstborn's always like, they got this.
Yeah, no, they
and
got
I
it.
can relate. But then the youngest was like, okay, well, yeah, I'll try that, because they're like, what's the loss in this? I'll just try it. But he did. And I remember some of the activities and things they did in there. I was like, wow, I'm so glad he took this, because he didn't get a ton of hours credit. I think it was worth 1 hour, but it was the fact that there were some skills taught in the class and that they don't teach you in high school. And so as I said, it was a decision that he had to make, but we made a strong suggestion that I'm thinking you probably would benefit from this. Sure. Do you guys have anything like that at Anchor Counseling, or do you know anybody that does? Because I think it's helpful, especially with people graduating from high school and not having to wait till you get to college to try and like take the class, but you can.
I'm not sure that there's anything currently, but it's definitely something that I would be interested in doing again if I had enough, seniors or even freshmen or sophomores that would be interested in it.
Oh, wow. All right. Cool. Sounds like a great small group to me.
Small groups.
I know. But anyway, I think, was it 6 weeks when you guys did it?
It was 3.
3. So was it 3 consecutive weeks?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to have to look into that because the main thing is I think that is one of the things I heard a couple of moms talking about Sunday at church is they have girls and they're like, we just wish we had this transition thing because, when you're seniors, you kind of think you're too cool for school, you know what I mean? Or that's what we called it, senioritis. You're like, okay, I'm done. I'm ready to get out of high school, but yet you don't really know what's kind of coming as far as that goes. So that's something that, hey, do that again. We'll let you do that again. Guys, we just want to tell you thank you for joining us today. As always, if you have questions for Lawson, we would love, Pastor Lauren and I, to hear from you at renew@opendoorchurch.com. We'll be glad to get that to her so that she can answer some things that you may have for her. For us, if there are topics that you want to talk about, we love hearing your thoughts and your feedback. We've got some other guests coming on shortly, but every other time, Lauren and I have been coming on and just chatting, having real conversations about real life, things that we've been through, things that the Lord has brought us through. And so we love you. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.